Let me immerse you in the sounds of my local Walmart. Here is the toy section. Here is the Lego aisle. This side you see colorful boxes, Minecraft, Ninjago, some Star Wars sets. But then you flip to the other side. The black boxes. I know, the prophecies foretold this. If you're an adult fan of Lego, and I have a feeling that you are, then odds are you gravitate towards these black boxes much like the black holes they're inspired by. After all, these are the 18 plus sets. Here you'll see only the coolest and the most detailed adult Lego sets. A giant statue of Iron Man? Yeah, you know that's right, he is looking stark against that black background, or giant detailed models of Pokemon. Yeah, baby, I'm a real Pokemon fan, not like those faker 10-year-olds. There's a Sesame Street set in a black void. The Shire from Lord of the Rings in a black void. Shrek. Why is Shrek in the void? We need to get Shrek out of the void. These black boxes are everywhere. They're taking over, and it's all thanks to something called minimalism. And minimalism is awful. It is why your local McDonald's looks like a corporate boardroom. It's why all new houses look like something I'd build in Minecraft. It's why Cybertrucks exist. I work in an office, and in the lobby there's a stack of white books, and the books have nothing in common. I looked at the spines, but they're all just white. It's like there's just no soul to minimalism. It all looks the same, and yes, that has bled into these 18 plus Lego boxes. So today, let's ask some questions. First, why does Lego use the boring black box? And what message do they want to sell with the black box? And then, I also want you to look at yourself in the mirror, go ahead, and ask yourself, is it my fault? My name's Eric Crittenden, I'll be the one to tell you, because this is Clutch Power, a show about the ways we love Lego. Episode 16, The Blight of the Boring Black Boxes. In part 1, an interview with Graham E. Hancock, author, editor, public speaker, and yes, folks, he too misses those big box flaps on Lego sets. We're going to check out the history of Lego box art, the first rumblings of our bleak black box future, and Lego's diligence to a fault of keeping those 18 plus sets looking, 18 plus. In a bonus segment for Clutch Power supporters, Graham and I chat about a long lost era of Lego Star Wars box design, when it was Lucasfilm, not Lego, calling the shots. And in part 2, the best and worst of Lego boxes, and what might be the best middle ground between the black boxes and, actual fun box design. Is this episode niche? Yes. Is this episode indicative of a wider societal issue and design trend that has infiltrated every aspect of our lives to the point that literally the Chick-fil-A play place near me is all gray and looks like it's straight out of 1984? Yeah. That too. Part 1. Liquid death and cardboard.
Water is not yoga. Water is liquid death. And that's why this brand needs to exist. To finally give water the ice-cold can and ice-cold name it deserves.
In 2009, a graphic designer saw concert-goers drinking water out of Monster Energy cans. He took that and he said,
what is the dumbest possible idea we could do for this?
And boom, liquid death. It's water. It's literally water, but it looks like a beer. It's got a gold can, there's skulls, there's like black and white images. It is a modern solution for a modern problem.
Do you feel you drink enough water in a day?
Well, probably not.
Yeah, a civic science poll found 47% of Americans aren't drinking enough water. Men need about 3.5 liters a day, women 2.5. Liquid Death's founder was going after that demographic.
Hundreds of parents who message us on social saying, thank you, Liquid Death, you finally got my 9-year-old excited to drink water instead of soda because he thinks he has something he's not supposed to have.
Which, you know, I think pretty objectively is great. The more people drinking water, the better. But there is kind of another side to this, the social side of liquid death. A lot of people think liquid death is alcohol. That's kind of the whole point. Here's a comment from that video with the founder. Quote, "It changed the game for sober people who can now feel normal with a liquid death in hand while out at bars." Here's another stat, this time from a YouGov poll. More and more people are getting into liquid death, especially if you were born in the last 40 years or so. But if I had to ding liquid death for one thing, it is this. I can fill up a cup at a water fountain right now for free. Or I can buy a 19 fluid ounce can of liquid death at my local Kroger for $2. Or if you're at a Live Nation concert who owns liquid death and who also suck, it'll be $5 or $8, even $10 at some venues for water. And what baffles me the most is that people are willing to pay that for the perception of drinking alcohol. 10 American dollars for a perception. So, Eric, you're probably saying that was a wonderful audio essay, but what does that have to do with Lego?
I think they felt that, like, if adults were going to be welcomed into the Lego product portfolio, they needed to do so in a way that made them feel okay about it, that didn't make them feel too embarrassed about going to the toy shop and buying a toy.
Yep, Lego themselves admitted that. Quote, "Adults who otherwise felt embarrassed to buy Legos for themselves have since gravitated towards the brand with its new 18+ labeling. In fact, as of 2024, 15% of Lego sets were those 18+ for adults black boxes, and that is a far cry from where Lego started. So I called up Graham E. Hancock, writer and editor at Blocks Magazine, and the thick Lego tome, The Forces of Creativity. Graham was the guy to take me through Lego box history to see how we got to this outbreak of black boxes.
If you think back to the very first stuff, Eric, that obviously predates you and I'm picturing town plan boxes as some of the earliest ones that I can kind of visualize in my head, where they started having like children interacting with the layouts and things in front of them. And you kind of really think of that kind of box art and marketing material as something that really does look like it's from a different era. It really does look like it's from the early days of consumer products and things, especially if you compare it to anything that we think of as contemporary. Probably what we think of as Lego box art today, what we picture in our mind's eye, is that stuff that happened after 1978, after the minifigure was introduced, because that, I think, probably marks the biggest shift that we've ever really seen in one go of Lego box art. They introduced space, castle, and town as the three core themes that would drive the play experience to the future of what Lego building was. And to go with that, the boxes had to convey these toys in it doesn't look dynamic to us now, but at the time, it would have looked dynamic, the way that the minifigures were situated around the product, the fact that they got backdrops for the product, the fact that they've been beautifully photographed. Look, a certain treatment was being given to the product that was probably greater than what we'd seen before. It was something a little bit more artistic that was making the model look more like a plaything that you'd really want to engage with when you saw it.
If you look at sets from right before the minifig came out, I think you see sort of a very early attempt of having a background, but it still kind of very much feels like this is a model for display.
Yes. And it was a time when, yeah, as you say, clearly there was an attempt to do something. It was an attempt to push things forward to some degree. But yeah, everything looks so static. And I think that's obviously in part as well, because whenever we talk about the minifigure coming along, we talk about it as if it happened in isolation. But actually, there was loads of accessory elements and things that came along with them. And it allowed the models to look that bit more authentic than what came before. It allowed things to be posed at angles in more cases. It allowed everything to... Dynamic is the word that keeps springing to mind as to how everything felt once the minifigure had been introduced.
Yeah, so they had those big three themes. Looking at each of the box arts, what is kind of the general sense you get from, I guess, what Lego was trying to convey?
These look like toys that are going to compete with other action toys. Because if you think about what Lego bricks had always been like, especially if you think back to things like Town Plan, it was focused on the construction. It was focused on laying out a town, as the name implies. But then when you get to space, like this is something that once you built it, you can then play with, you can then engage with, in the same way that there would have been other products on the market. There would have been figures, there would have been other types of, rocket toys and things like that. And the Lego Group realized that children want to build this thing and then play with it. And the box art is showing you, look at what you can play with. Look at what we're going to draw you into here. It's kind of presenting it as a world instead of and again, just sparking that imagination as a child. Because when you're a child and you see these things, you don't just see what's on the box art. Your imagination, before you've even opened the box, is taking you to all these other places that are just beyond the frame and things like that. It's sparking you off. I mean, it's why as kids we spent so long looking at the catalogue pages, right? And even the sets we didn't have made a huge impression on us because this imagery is so important.
Yeah, looking at like the pirate sets, I think there's also something to having it be a real, as far as I can tell, a real diorama.
Yeah, you can feel the tactile nature of it. It doesn't feel at odds with the model at all. It feels like an extension. And I think that partly comes from the fact that they were actually photographed, they were constructed, it must have been so much fun to photograph these models when you see sort of behind the scenes of these big dioramas and things that they built for them.
It feels exciting, even looking at it now.
And I think the evolution of that, like Lego Star Wars, I think in 1999 was kind of a big evolution in how they presented the models, in that they still had that same vibe of putting them into a context, but they tried to add more motion and dynamism to them. So like the spaceships have got sort of the boosts coming behind them and the lasers firing around them, and they look like they're whooshing through the environment. And the models were photographed for real, but some of the backdrops were either illustrated or photographed, and then it was composited. So those models still keep that spirit of world building and imagination, but just move things forward into a more dynamic way that I think was the real starting point for where we've ended up today with the kids sets, with how sort of action-packed the box art tends to be today.
It is sort of a sign of things to come, though. I mean, I'm looking at 2000, 2001. This looks completely like a digital background.
I think particularly for those very earliest Star Wars ones, there was a balance between the tools that were available, the limitations that they had, and then obviously as time went on and the Lego Group could use more digital tools, they took advantage of them. But obviously it took a while for that stuff to end up looking as photorealistic as the stuff that was actually photorealistic because it was photographed.
Yeah, one or two that comes to mind from those early Star Wars days are the first UCS sets. The box art on that is it looks so weird.
It's really different, isn't it? But I think what this is actually a really good example of is that, again, this black box idea hasn't come from nowhere. And what I think the Lego Group were trying to do with these sets is tap into almost like, look, guys, this is sophisticated. This is a model that you're building. It's not a toy. And I mean, again, there was no minifigures in sight with these early Ultimate Collector sets. They kept the minifigures out of them. And it was only over the years, as fans started to demand more and more exclusive minifigures, that they started to put them in with them. So, yeah, I think almost trying to convey the idea of technical drawings and really aging it up is an early attempt on the Lego Group's part at doing these sort of black box style designs.
Well, and then if you skip ahead like 10 years, you get to the early architecture sets. It's kind of brought that professional adult vibe back.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Architecture was incredibly successful, more so than was anticipated when that debuted. So there probably were learnings taken from way back then that this black box thing was a smart move. I mean, in my personal view, I think that the black box makes a lot of sense for architecture because that was presenting, especially in the early days, as you know, these are scale models for architecture enthusiasts. They were mainly in white, so they really stood out on these black boxes. And I think for that particular product theme, it made an awful lot of sense to do those in black. And they do look really sleek, those early architecture boxes.
Overall, I think that sort of shows Lego's shift maybe towards more like models, where especially with, the 18 plus black black boxes, which we will get into, is just, we want to show you this really detailed thing. I feel like that's removed from, the 1978 space. This is something we want you to inhabit and kind of be immersed in.
If we think of like, a pirate ship sat on the sea and, with different stuff in the distance and everything, the story that they're selling to a child there is this is a pirate ship that's going to take you on a grand adventure over the, through the seas and everything. And I still think that's true on the modern box art that's aimed at children. Because if you look at, I know I'm picturing a Friends set, you'll have a picture of the building that it builds, and then out of focus behind it, you'll have other hints of buildings and trees and all different stuff in the environment. So again, it's saying to children, this building is part of this world that you're building. Like, this is part of the story. It's part of something grander than just this cafe or whatever it happens to be. So I think although they've changed the methodology for creating the images, and especially for old school fans, like, we love the old stuff that we grew up with, I think the concept is remarkably similar to what it used to be. However, as you identify with the adult stuff, that's a kind of different thing, in that there's no attempt to sell you the play story there. The focus there is on, like you say, this is the model to build and presumably to display.
Yeah, and I would imagine most listeners of this show are more than familiar with the black Lego boxes. When did that really start?
So that was in 2020 when Lego Group launched the Adults Welcome marketing initiative. Basically, the company was tapping into the big kidult market. We'd always been told that it was a tiny, tiny fraction of Lego consumers who were adults buying for themselves. And then all of a sudden in 2020, it was acknowledged that it was about 20%, I think it was, of adult consumers buying for themselves. So the Lego Group wanted to make a lot more products to cater to this growing market. And their feeling was that the best way to communicate that these products were for adults and not for children was with plain black boxes with the model as the focal point.
I'd like to analyze the black box a bit. And here, I'll just pull up a random 11372 Autumn Cottage Garden.
The problem is you can picture in your head the alternative box where it has more of an environment around it, where it gives you that hint of a bigger world that this awesome cottage garden exists in. And again, I understand that, the adults aren't looking to play with it in the same way, but adults still want to, if you've got this sitting on your shelf, you're going to look at it and you're going to imagine yourself walking through that garden. You're going to imagine what this environment is like. The point of having these things is to spark our minds, to spark our imaginations whilst we're just sat in our living room or our study or wherever we've got these Lego sets on display. And I think that this is a good example of a set where that kind of thinking about, going further beyond the boundaries of the model would just make it more compelling. Or even just have a palette of colors on the back of the box that matches autumn, something that feels that some design and artistry has gone into it.
One way, maybe Lego's not meeting it halfway, but one way, maybe they're meeting it 10% of the way, is the border at the bottom of the box, which is different, I think, for every set, as far as I can tell.
I think it is just contrast because, if you look at this one, it's got the orange band. And I mean, another set that I often think of, that I found the box art a little bit disappointing on, is the Blacktron Renegade. So that one's 10355. So obviously that one's a black and yellow spaceship. So it's got a yellow band along the bottom. So I think the designers pick out a color from the model to contrast with the black and have as a strip along the bottom. So yeah, I think it is just purely based on color. But the reason I found the Blacktron Renegade a little bit disappointing was because previously when the Lego Group had done retro sets for adults, they'd done them in classic vintage style box art. So if you look at 21322 Pirates of Barracuda Bay, that one looks like a classic Lego set. It's got that stripe where it used to say system. It's got the yellow border. It's got all of the background things that you expect with a little bit of detail, but not too much detail. And the model just looks so exciting, and it just takes you back to that feeling of childhood of getting Lego sets. Whereas the Blacktron Renegade, the problem is because the model's borrowing a design from a vintage set, it almost doesn't suit the black box art style because it suits that old kind of 80s aesthetic from when the original set came out. And the model itself almost doesn't look as compelling on the black box. And I really wonder if the Lego Group miss a beat sometimes by not drawing the model out and making it look as exciting and fun and interesting as it could if it was on something with a little bit more depth and interest to it.
Well, and what's weird about the Blacktron Renegade is there is a background, kind of.
Yes, there's the hint of one, the hint of that classic Blacktron grid.
Which is almost worse.
It's teasing you as to what this could have been.
Yeah. Well, another one that comes to mind is that I've seen brought up a lot is the Sesame Street from, what was that, 2020, 2021?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Which, this very colorful, very playful set just rendered on the most depressing background you've ever seen.
Well, this is where I think that, even if you want to make it the general statement piece for Lego sets, it's really important to be mindful of when you need something different. Because, that Sesame Street needed... Fans of Sesame Street are going into a store and buying themselves a Lego Sesame Street set. Know that that's absurd. They know that a grown adult buying a Sesame Street toy to sit down and build is absurd. So they can cope with there being a bit of fun, a bit of colour, a bit of vibrancy. The Winnie the Pooh one, the recent statue of Winnie the Pooh set turned up the other day, and I thought the exact same thing about that. I was like, why is Pooh not surrounded by honey or the 100 Acre Woods? Like, he's sat on a black box. That is not Winnie the Pooh. It's not appropriate for that character. And this is where it's just... I really hope that we reach a point where the Lego Group feel confident enough that adults have bought into the idea of buying Lego sets. And they feel brave enough to say, okay, you can have things other than black boxes now.
Another one that comes to mind, because this is one of the rare examples where it's sort of a re-release, is the recent Shire set. If you compare that box to the Unexpected Gathering set, it's night and day. I mean, it just looks so much cozier. If the original intent of box art in the 70s was to immerse you, this feels almost like the opposite. It's meant to say this is only a model.
And it almost reduces, in this particular example, it almost reduces the impact of the set because it makes it look smaller. And there's something really phony about how the green looks against the black. Whereas when you've got it with that earthy tones behind it and everything, I really do feel that these sets should kind of awaken the child within us, and the way to do that is by sparking the idea that they are part of something bigger.
I mean, I think there is a place for the black box art for, I'm thinking the big model sets, like the Iron Man set, the helmets.
Those are good examples, yeah.
But when it comes with minifigs, it's it almost is you can't have your cake and eat it too. If I'm not going to play with this, why do I have minifigs?
Exactly. And the modular buildings are another good example of that, where the box art for those used to be so much more fun. And then the Winter Village sets, again, when you've got a sort of idyllic snow-covered building just on a black box instead of in a snowy Christmas card setting.
It almost feels like Lego is afraid to break the rules of their box arts. If it's Lego ideas, it doesn't matter what it is, it has to be on the black box.
And I think that's something that's interesting about the way the Lego Group think about certain things is things do tend to fall into buckets or boxes, and things do tend to be quite regimented overall. And every now and again, there are things that push at the edges and do something a bit different or weird, but they usually require a bit of a leap of faith and someone really believing in something and really pushing it. Architecture, for example, architecture was something that was part of the new business group. It was seen as something really different. Ideas was something that was seen as a real experiment. A lot of these things originally didn't have exact formulas and weren't kind of regimented in the way that the Lego Group approached them because they were experiments, because they were something different. But then once something is big enough and starts to fall into a pattern and things, then it feels like things have to sort of fit a certain form and format. And fans can be as guilty as the company for expecting things to be a certain way and fit into a certain category.
Up next, for Clutch Power supporters only, a rare case of one LEGO set having 2 box designs, and the history behind the box art of one of LEGO's most popular themes. For everyone else, it is on to part 2, bad box art, good box art, and the 5 sets that still look adult without resorting to those black boxes. Part 2. You miss the shots you don't take. Every year, LEGO puts out more and more sets. They put 534 out in 2010, 859 in 2020, and 1,090 last year, 2025. And even if we take out the 15% of those 1,090 sets that had the black box, that's still like 920-ish sets, each which need unique box art. That is a lot. Honestly, it is miraculous that LEGO has only had a few whiffs over like 70 years. But those whiffs are very funny. So what are some examples of bad LEGO box art?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I can think of one, and that's only because of this podcast, Disturbing the Peace, that I was listening to, where they shouted out, I believe it was Final Duel 2.
Oh, so this is the Star Wars set that was this tiny little diorama, right?
Which is just, I mean, as a set, it's really bad, but the background.
That's such a good example of where I always used to be really tickled in the early Star Wars days of the combination between Star Wars and Lego charm. And there's something about the Imperial officer having the classic Lego smiley face. And as you say, just the nonsense backdrop, and to a set that the element budget on that must have been so small, they must have just been told, stick some minifigures in a box.
Yeah, it's 14 pieces. Are there other bad box arts you could think of?
I can think of other weird box arts. Like, I remember Hidden Side was one that everyone had strong opinions on, because the Lego Group were trying to pull in a slightly older audience with these sets, whilst at the same time conveying like an augmented reality app that you could use with them. So they did this really interesting graphic box art that almost looks a bit comic booky. And I can't say I love it. I can't say it's my favorite ever Lego box art, but I really admire the ambition of it. I think when they do try and do something different, it's really interesting and really fresh. And I think this is a good example of something that looked just different, just unlike any other Lego box art that there's been before or since.
Well, every once in a while, LEGO does take a swing. The one that comes to mind is 76157, the Wonder Woman set.
You are right. What? How?
What happened?
How? Yeah, no. Excellent question. I have nothing. This is so different.
Yeah, and it was like I think they only did one set for this movie, but like they never did anything like this with any other DC property.
Which begs the question, was this an experiment? Was this a test to see if people would still buy into it, even without the model on the front of the box?
Well, let's analyze it. What does this box art say?
Literally, it's asking you to put the movie and the characters first, isn't it?
Yeah.
And whatever else comes second.
I don't understand.
But yeah, because this is literally saying to fans, or to, I guess, not even fans, kids obviously, maybe even more so, but anyone walking past the aisle, it's saying, do you want these two characters as minifigures? Do you need Wonder Woman and Cheetah? If so, you've got to buy this set. Like, that's because it's not relying on the model at all.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? Judging by the Bricklink prices on those figures, people did not want those figures, actually. You can get both for under $10.
So if this box art was just an experiment, I think it's safe to say this failed. Because if they're that cheap on Bricklink, that suggests a lot of these sets were knocking around.
And also, like, why this movie?
Yeah.
It's just very weird.
I think you might have found the weirdest Lego box art ever with this one.
Yeah. So, looking back over the very long history of Lego box art sets, did any jump out at you that you really love?
I mean, the old sort of, I mean, Pirates was my favorite as a kid, but anything from that sort of like 80s, 90s era, I think looks fantastic. I mean, it's just how dynamic the things look. I mean, and to modernize, they don't look dynamic anymore, but the sort of beauty of the way that they were photographed and everything, as I said before, with this sort of bigger world around them that hinted at what was going on, it was just so joyful and had that wonderful balance between looking like a really exciting plaything, but also having that classic Lego charm that you get from, 2 dots and a smile for the face sort of thing. There's something about that contrasted with these big adventurous worlds that I still think looks really charming to this day. And I mean, the set that I mentioned before, Pirates of Barracuda Bay, the way they recaptured that for that model was really, I mean, I can remember receiving that box, opening the packet, and just like getting this warm glow of nostalgia from what they'd done there. I thought that was really, really fantastic. And I think through the years, they've really sort of developed that idea. And I always remember the Adventurers boxes looking really cool in the sort of late 90s, early noughties, where they were capturing that Indiana Jones vibe in a really, really compelling way.
Well, one box art I want to give a shout out because it captured me as a kid, and I still think it's great, is the Life on Mars sets.
Yes.
Which are they're so weird to begin with, but the one that I saw in the magazines as a kid is 7317, which is the one with the big pneumatic system. And like it doesn't, how do you even make that look appealing? But they did.
I think that's such a good example of a theme as well, that the box art sold the dream, right? And that is such a good example of where, like you say, what does it look like? But then as soon as you contextualize it with that box art, it makes sense. And you can buy into it and you can see how it fits in to this broader world. And yeah.
If you put this set on a black background, that would look terrible. In a way, it would kind of look like the Blacktron Renegade, I feel like.
Well, that's the problem is, I mean, context is key. And sometimes that context, that background, tells you more about what the model is in its setting. And if something is a bit abstracted, then you can't get that just from having it on a completely plain background.
Another, I guess, interesting box art example is the recent Lego education sets. Beautiful box art. The white with like the drawing and the pastels. But that doesn't work for every set, because like you can't sell someone on a brand new $600 Pokemon set and have it be like this artistic creation.
And this is where I suppose what works so well about the ones we've been talking about from the 80s and 90s, and then the more traditional kid sets today that have continued that tradition, is that the model has to really be front and center, right? And then the backdrop has to be apparent that it's a backdrop, because then it's the communication on it is so clear. And that's probably why it's been the standard for so long, because the education sets, for example, again, thinking about what's the story that this box is telling, they're clearly saying to parents, this is going to, your kid's going to learn something. It says build, solve, invent in big letters. There's like a dramatic rocket flying across. It's supposed to say this is going to give your kids some science knowledge. So it's telling a different story to one where it's a specific model, and it's saying to the kid rather than the parent, you want this, spaceship or castle or, ninja mech or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. It's almost an evolution of those original, like the original Lego sets where it's just the hands and the bricks. Just kind of like imagine the possibilities instead of imagine this one possibility. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And it's something that's always interesting with the big boxes of loose bricks, just the different ways that those have been presented over time. And they always want to show lots and lots of loose bricks to tell you that you're getting that in the box, but they also want to show some inspirational models to show what you could actually build with them. Some other box art, while we're talking about some of the different stuff and the weird stuff, the recent Ninjago Legends sets have been really interesting. like 71872, for example. And with these, you feel like they're trusting the audience a little bit. They're trusting the potential consumer to be a bit of an Ninjago fan and know that the model isn't going to look exactly like this. Like, it is the model, but they've sort of augmented it with a bit of illustration, a bit of sort of fancy lighting, a little bit of artistic license to tell the story in a very vivid way, in a way that, again, maybe this even feels a bit more movie poster or novel book cover kind of thing, where it really is, telling you something a bit dramatic, telling you something pretty exciting about what's in there.
And what I love about these Ninjago Legends sets is it still has that feeling that you get from a black box, like that this is a model for display. But it's I feel like this is a great example of how to bridge that gap.
You know what? I think you've hit it perfectly there, because it has got that balance between saying this is not for small kids, but it's still got that sense of fun. It's still got that sense of excitement. It's still not being embarrassed by being a toy. And yeah, I think leaning more in this direction could work for a lot of the adult sets. And I would hope that the Lego Group would be paying attention to what's going on with these. And I imagine that all of the different projects are talking to each other and keeping an eye on how different things are performing to find that sweet spot and that balance.
Yeah. Here, wrapping up, I kind of want to jump back in time and look at sort of two long lost, forgotten aspects of Lego boxes. And I want to start with the old Lego box flaps.
Let's go full old men, Eric, and just say how much better everything used to be, right? And not like we've been doing that anyway. But the box flaps were they were amazing. Like, literally, you'd see this massive set in a store. You would crouch down because you were a kid. So I always remember the big sets being at Toys R Us on the bottom shelf. So I'd crouch down, and there'd be this incredible castle on this box, and you would lift up that flap, and underneath there'd be all these photos showing different things that the set does, showing different details and aspects of it. And then that's underneath the flap of the box, and then the actual box has got this big clear plastic cover, and underneath it are the coolest, most special elements that are in that box. So all of the shields and the dragon parts and the swords and the minifigure helmets and things are all there. And again, it's so clear looking back on it what they were doing. They were saying, "Look, kid, look at all the cool stuff that's in this box. You know, you need this one."
But it worked.
Oh yeah, and the amount of time I spent looking. I'd be in Toys R Us with my pocket money that could buy me a little, one of those little tiny boxes where you got 30 bricks and a minifigure. But I would spend half an hour first looking at those massive boxes and lifting those flaps and admiring all of the pieces in there. And
now we're just fully reminiscing at this point.
Well, the problem is it's so hard to convey.
Yeah.
Unless you experienced it as a child, because the boxes were so big compared to you, which was part of it.
Yeah.
The flap lifting up, again, the psychology of this must be so significant, because it's like a moment of discovery. It's like you see the set initially and you're excited and you're drawn in by that image. But then you lift that box flap up and it's like a next step of learning about that model and looking into it further. And then physically seeing the tangible pieces. Some of the flags and things and all the specialized elements, they were so exciting because, you knew what a basic brick was. You knew what some of the regular elements were, but those specialized pieces, they were the ones that set your imagination on fire.
I mean, I think there is something to saying, like, this is the specific minifig in this specific box,
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to touch on, every once in a while, especially in the early 2000s, Lego was embarrassed at being Lego.
Yeah.
So they would downplay the fact this was a Lego set, specifically with Galador and Bionicle.
So with these themes, the Lego Group were worried that the brick was out of date, outmoded, that maybe their future would not be as a construction toy company. So they were trying to build their own stories, their own brands, and pull in children who didn't like construction toys. That's who Bionicle and Galador were originally developed for kids who don't like construction toys. And that's why the very earliest Bionicle sets don't have that many pieces. You can build them in about 10 minutes, and then you can get playing with them. Now, I'm very cautious about lumping Bionicle and Galador into the same box. Because
That's reasonable. That's very fair.
they're very different beasts.
Yeah. But I think originally, with at least that first wave of Bionicle, the intent was the same.
The base thinking was the same, exactly. Different kids don't want construction toys, therefore get that Lego logo as small as possible. So they don't focus on that. They focus on the action figure, which there is some kind of logic to if you think your future is in action figures. But of course, this was at the tail end of the action figures heyday anyway, that they were launching these things. So it was a bit, it was a little bit ambitious and obviously very misguided in terms of thinking that the brick was done. But yeah, the packaging is just trying to mimic other toy packaging. I mean, the Bionicle is obviously more effective because the characters look so cool on that artwork. Whereas the Galador ones, like, I mean, it shows the toy, but the toy isn't all that exciting. So it isn't necessarily as well crafted as some of the competitor action figures that were around at the time.
You do see the specific figure that you're going to get. It's just, do you want that figure?
Exactly.
Well, if you look at, I'll just pull a random old school Bionicle, 8590, one of the Rakshi. If you look at that box versus like one of the last gen Bionicle in like 2015, I think you do see the shift. You know, on the 2003 set, it's Bionicle, Lego, whereas the 2015 is Lego Bionicle.
I think that's it. Over time, as Bionicle proved a success, and the problem is, as it became more successful, I guess there was no way to disassociate it from the Lego group, because, I mean, how could you when they were claiming the success and, you know, like, people knew what it was, people understood where it had come from, especially because as much as like the original intent was that this is for a kid who's not so into building, there was a lot of building involved with a lot of the sets through the years. So yeah, they became a lot less shy about it over time.
Yeah. And I would say maybe by 2015, which was the reboot of Bionicle, Lego was more popular than Bionicle.
Oh, yeah. I think that became apparent with how long that lasted for as a reboot. Because don't get me wrong,
one wave.
There are a lot of Bionicle fans out there, but maybe not necessarily enough. And the Lego group, the problem is the Lego group didn't recruit enough children with that one. Because it's all very well relying on the old school fans, but you've also got to bring in a new generation if you want to reboot something like Bionicle and get them excited about the story.
So is there a perfect Lego box? I don't think so, but these days I think that black box is wrong more often than it's right. So what's the fix? How about this? At the end of the day, we all just need to accept that Lego is a kid's toy. It was envisioned as a kid's toy. It is mainly targeted towards kids. It is not, and I think this is a lesson for anyone over like 20, it is not always intended for you. Look, I get being insecure about buying Lego. I personally have had shame walking around the mall with that stupid bright yellow Lego bag. But I think that's honestly kind of part of the game, right? Like, we are buying kids' toys. Just accept it. I have. It's crazy how much the pressure falls off. Graham has too, and he wrote a book and everything. So if you don't trust my credibility, trust his. Thanks so much to Graham for taking time out of his busy schedule to chat about, honestly, probably one of my most pedantic topics yet. Who else would talk to me about Lego box design for an hour? You can find Graham's work at Blocks Magazine. In fact, right now he told me they're selling a Lego Star Wars Collector's Edition. It's this 132-page one-off special with a lot of good stuff and interviews, including, I like this part, an interview with Anthony Daniels, aka C-3PO. What's that guy been up to? It's worth a read. Blocks Magazine just as a publication, so good. Speaking of Lego Star Wars, get yourself a copy of The Forces of Creativity. It is an insanely detailed read for anyone with even like a passing interest in Lego Star Wars. And if you like this episode, share the show around, and following it and rating it everywhere is a huge help. It is the same handle everywhere, clutchpower.pod. Thank you to my dear Clutch Power members for taking your support of the show to the next level. You all really inspire me to keep just pushing the show further and further. Like, remember when all I did was just cover a Lego theme? Now we're doing like philosophical minimalism analysis. Things are getting weird and I'm loving it. If you want to become a supporter, the link is in the show notes. You're going to get bonus content for every episode along with a special digital Lego mock. For this one, it's a recreation of the black box, of course. You like the black box? Then build it and put this up on display and have the strength of your convictions. Sorry, that was kind of aggressive. Weak convictions are like one of my main pet peeves. My name is Eric Crittenden, and this has been Clutch Power. Stay connected.